More than 300 million of Muslims around the world call themselves Shia. What does it mean to be Shia? How do they think? How do they live? And much more in the Shia podcast. Assalamu alaikum everyone. This is the Shia podcast on Shia Islam. I'm Syed Razi, your host. This is the third episode of the Shia Studies podcast series. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. In the previous episodes, I talked about some introductions concerning my main topic, that is introducing Shia. I introduced the main source on which I am proceeding, the book Shiite Islam by Allama Tabatabai. Then I talked about three terms that relates to our topic. They were religion, Islam, and Shiism. Now in this episode, I want to start the main topic, means introducing Shia. As I promised, in this episode, I'm going to talk about historical background of Shiism. The first question that we are facing with in the history of Shiism is the origin of Shiism. In this episode, I want to talk about this significant subject. Based on historical reports and evidences during the lifetime of the Prophet, there were some groups of people who known as fans of Ali, and they were called Shiite Ali. There were many reasons why a group of people during the period of prophecy introduced themselves as the Shiite. The Prophet Muhammad in different times and places had pointed to his successor and to this issue that this placement belongs to Imam Ali. The Prophet's efforts to introduce Ali as his successor had not been in secret, and the Prophet intentionally in different times had pointed to his successor. So it was natural that some people at that time during the lifetime of the Prophet called themselves as Shiite Ali. Let me point to some of these historical reports. As was mentioned, introducing Ali as the successor by Prophet happened several times from the early year of the rise of Islam. Based on one of these reports, the Prophet, in the first public invitation to Islam, introduced Ali as his successor and inheritor. Based on the verse 214 of the chapter 26 of the Quran, which was revealed to the Prophet 3 years after Bi'tha, 612 CE, the Prophet was ordered to warn the nearest of his kins and invite them to Islam. According to what is mentioned in Shia and Sunni commentaries of the Quran, after receiving this command, the Prophet invited 40 of his nearest kins for a meal. He then said to them, "O children of Abdul Muttalib, I do not think anyone from among the Arabs has ever brought his people something better than what I have brought for you. I have brought you the happiness of this world and the hereafter." Then he said, "I invite you to two words, and with these two words you will enter paradise and be saved from hell. These two words are saying that there is no God but oneness God, La ilaha illallah, and testifying that I am the prophet of God." Then he said, "Which one of you will help me in this mission and become my vicegerent and deputy?" Everyone was silent. Then Ali said, "O Messenger of God, I will." The Prophet then said, "This is my vicegerent and caliph among you. Listen to what he says and follow his orders. As I said, one of the verses of the Quran has pointed to this event. So, this event has stated in the Quranic exegesis, this verse known as al-Indhar verse. From other angle, this event has stated in sources of hadith because as it's mentioned, the Prophet has stated narration in that gathering. This narration known as Hadith Yawm al-Indhar or Hadith al-Ashira or Hadith Yawm al-Dar has stated in sources of Hadith. And also as a historical event, Muslim historians have addressed to this event. Among these Quranic exegesis and sources of hadith and history, I can point Al-Burhan by Bahrani, Tafsir al-Quran al-Azim by Ibn Kathir, Ad-Dur al-Manthur by Suyuti, Majmu al-Bayan by Tabarsi, and other Islamic scholars. For more information, you can visit my website. If we accept that the Prophet has introduced Ali as his successor in that party, then it is unlikely that the Prophet didn't repeat that action. The Prophet surely has introduced Ali to the people, at least to the some of his near companions. Also, it is unlikely that the Prophet introduced Ali as his successor but didn't give a duty to him as a successor and didn't pay attention to his position. According to lots of completely authenticated hadith that both Sunnis and Shiites have stated, the Prophet explicitly said that Ali is free from error and sin in his actions and words. Thus, whatever he says is perfect and based on the teachings of religion. Based on one of these narrations that Salme has recounted, the Prophet said, Ali is always with the truth and the Quran, and the truth and the Quran are always with him, and until the day of judgment, they will not be separated from each other. This hadith has been transmitted through 15 channels in Sunni sources and 11 in Shiite sources. Salmeh, Ibn Abbas, Abu Bakr, Aisha are among its transmitters. Also, the Prophet said about Ali, he is the most knowledgeable of men in the issues in matters pertaining to Islamic sciences and commands. Let me recount one of these narrations. The Prophet said, arbitrations has been divided into 10 parts. 9 parts are given to Ali, and one part is divided among all the people. You can find other hadith in the website. No Islamologist or historian can deny Ali's services and sacrifices, especially in the early years of Islam. On the night of the migration, when the Prophet was informed by God that he was going to be killed by the infidels of Mecca, so he decided to emigrate to Medina. It was Ali who was lying in the bed of the Prophet and foiled the plan of the infidels. This event is so significant that it became the beginning of the Islamic calendar. The details of this emigration and Ali's sacrifice has been stated in sources of history. Among these sources, I can mention At-Tarikh by Tabari, Al-Bidaya wa Nahaya by Ibn Kathir, and other Muslim historians. For more information, you can visit the website. There are many reasons why the prophets and the Muslims left Mecca. Briefly, I can say that Mecca was no longer suitable and safe for the Muslims, and the Prophet was sensing that many of his followers could not bear any more suffering in Mecca. In addition to safety concerns, the Prophet also did not have the freedom to propagate his message. The message of Islam was universal, and by remaining in Mecca, he would be depriving others from hearing the word of God. As a result, Muslims in groups with the permission of the Prophet began to emigrate to Medina, which at that time called Yathrib, and the Prophet remained in Mecca waiting for the permission of God for his hijrah. In less than 3 months, most of the companions of the Prophet emigrated to Medina. Finding the support of the people of Medina for the Muslims, heads of Quraysh realized that Yathrib has become a base for the Prophet and his followers. So they feared the emigration of the Prophet. They held a meeting in a place in the name of Dar al-Nadwa, and at the end, they decided to choose one man from each tribe, and they killed the Prophet all together. So Banu Hashim, the kinsmen of the Prophet, could not fight all of the tribes. God informed his Prophet about the assassination plan. The verse 30 of chapter 8 of the Quran is narrated to be revealed then.
وَإِذْ يَمْكُرُ بِكَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لِيُثْبِتُوكَ أَوْ يَقْتُلُوكَ أَوْ يُخْرِجُوكَ وَيَمْكُرُونَ وَيَمْكُرُ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ.
When the faithless plotted against you to take you captive or to kill or expel you, they polluted and Allah devised. And Allah is the best of devisers. So on the first night of the Rabi of the year 14 after Bi'tha, 622 CE, the Prophet left Mecca. At that night, Ali slept in the bed of the Prophet so that the assassins will not realize the emigration of the Prophet. The night is called Laylatul Mabit, means nights of the sleeping. The verse 207 of chapter 2 of the Quran is revealed about the sacrifice of Ali for saving the life of the Prophet.
وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يشري نفسه ابتغاء مرضات الله والله رؤوف بالعباد.
And among the people is he who sells his soul seeking the pleasure of Allah, and Allah is most kind to his servants. Okay, we were talking about Ali's services and sacrifices. Also, we can point to the role of Ali in battles of Islam with infidels and Jews. Ali participated in almost every major battle of early Islamic history. The Battle of Badr, Uhud, Khaybar, Khandaq, and Hunain. According to authentic sources, if Ali had not been presented in those wars, probably the enemy destroyed Islam totally. At the Battle of Uhud, Ali stood by the side of the Prophet who was hurt and risking his own life. As I mentioned, choosing Ali as the successor of the Prophet, it's not based on one or two evidences. There are many reasons for this issue. But surely the central and main evidence of this topic is events of Qadir Khum. In this event that is relates to the final pilgrimage of the Prophet, he explicitly proclaims Ali as his deputy and successor. In that event, the Prophet chose Ali to the general guardianship of the people and made Ali like himself their guardian. According to Shiite beliefs, on returning from the last pilgrimage to Mecca on the way to Medina, at a site called Qadir Khum, the Prophet chose Ali as his successor before the vast crowd that was accompanying the Prophet. The Shiites celebrate this event to this day as a major religious feast, marking the day when the right of Ali to succession was universally acclaimed. The Hadith of Qadir in its different versions is one of the definitely established hadith among Sunnis and Shiites. More than 100 of the companions have recounted this hadith with different chains of transmission and expressions, and it has been recorded in books of Sunnism and Shi'ism. Okay, let's back to our main question. Why in the period of prophecy some people call themselves as Shiite Ali? It is completely natural that based on these evidences and regards to the special Prophet's interest in Ali, some of the companions of Prophet gathering around him and introduced themselves as Shiite Ali. Furthermore, the phrase of Shiite Ali or Shiite of household has repeated a lot by Prophet. So we have to know the beginning of Shiism from the beginning of Islam. Let me recount one of these narrations, which is recorded in the book Ad-Durrul Manthur of Suyuti. Jabir says, we were in the presence of the Prophet when Ali appeared from far away. The Prophet said, I swear by him who holds my life in his hands, this person and his partisans, means Shia, will have salvation on the day of judgment. Dear audiences, what you heard was the third episode of the Introducing Shia podcast series. I hope was useful for you and you benefited from that. In the next episode, I'm going to talk about the cause of the separation of the Shiite minority from the Sunni majority. Listeners, thank you for your time and joining me in this episode. Please send me any questions or feedbacks to the podcast email info@theshia.ir, and you can also contact me on theshia.ir on Instagram and the Shia underline IR on Twitter. Please subscribe my channels. You can always catch our previous episodes. To be informed about our episodes, please follow us on our social media pages. You can find them on our website www.theshia.ir. Please visit my website. You can see the text of the episode and probably some more information about the episode on the website. Thank you. We will back with another episode. Take care of yourselves. Pray for each other. Goodbye.